Hello everyone, my name is Suhaib Ikram and welcome to HeadStart Online's Business Studies for A-Levels. Today we're going to take a dive into the first unit of Business Studies for A-Levels, which is Business and its Environment. Now, the first thing I'd like to mention is this is an AS level video. So if you're preparing for paper 1 and paper 2, you need to follow this video. If you're preparing for paper 3, there will be subsequent videos where I'll be mentioning that specifically. So let's get started. The first thing you'll need is a notebook. You need to start taking notes of the things that I'm going to write here and the things I'm going to say. It's going to make it easier for you to understand. It's going to make it easier for you when you actually go ahead to revise everything at the end of the lesson. Now this video is going to be Unit 1. Business and its environment. And we are going to start with the first subunit of this unit, which is enterprise. The first thing that we're going to be talking about today is what is a business? What elements should an organization have that make it a business? Now, most of you have seen businesses around you. They're parts of our lives and we see them everywhere we go, and they're means of people making money. Obviously, they're means of us getting services from someone. So take a second and think, what is a business? Now take a second and write down a definition that occurs to you. Now simply put, a business is any organization that uses resources to meet the needs of customers by providing a product or a service. So you need to write that down. I'll dictate that again. A business is any organization that uses resources to meet the needs of customers by providing a product or service that they demand. Now with this definition, let's look at an example. Let's look at Microsoft. Now, Microsoft is an organization. First, take a second to think about what Microsoft's product is. And of course, the first thing you're going to come up with is Windows. Obviously, they have a ton of other products as well, but let's focus on Windows for now. Now, according to our definition, a business is an organization that uses resources to meet the needs of customers by providing a product or service. And this is our definition. Now, when you look at Windows and you add that to the definition, now Microsoft is obviously an organization. That's an element here. They have certain resources at their disposal. Now, what are these resources that Microsoft has? Obviously, they've got their teams of software developers, they've got their premises, they've got all their employees, they've got a product that people want, obviously. Now, let's look at the product part and services. Now, what's the difference between a product and a service? A product is a tangible good. It's something that you can touch. It's something that you can actually have in your hands. It's a physical product. While a service is more intangible, that it only exists as a service but not as a set product. Now, Windows is a product. Now, let's think of a business that provides a service instead. And of course, you can come up with companies like JWD in Pakistan. Now, JWD is an advertising firm. Now, they provide advertising to their customers, so it's not a direct product. Advertising is not something that you can actually touch. It's not a tangible product. So that makes it a service. And another element of the definition here is customers. A business needs to have customers. It needs to sell its product or services. Now, In order to identify a business, you need to identify the main purpose of a business. Now, what I want you to do right now is on your notebook, make a list of 4 businesses that come to your mind and write down their resources, their customer, their product or services. Now, when we're talking about products or services, let's look at a key concept that I've told you about before. We have the key concept of creating value. Now, that's what a business does. As I told in the introductory video as well, this is the purpose of a business's existence. Look, let's take that with an example. Let's look at Microsoft again. Now, Microsoft create value for its customers. They create a product that has certain value. Creating value that is good for the customer and good for the company is the aim of any organization. And that is the definition of a business. Moving on. Now, as I've talked about creating value already, let's go into a bit more detail about that. The question here is, what is value addition? What is value added? First off, let's clear a misconception here. The difference between value added and creating value is just of perspective. The word creating value gives it a more proactive approach, that you're actually doing something to create value. I know there's not much of a difference here, but apparently to Cambridge there is. So what is adding value to your product or your company? Now, value addition is the difference between the cost of purchasing raw materials and the price the finished goods are sold for. So let's take another example. Let's look at Apple this time. Now, you'll see throughout this course, specifically at HeadStart, that I'm going to be using a lot of examples to explain these terms and definitions, because that's how these things go, that you need to have a practical grasp on everything that you're studying. Now, let's look at Apple. Let's see the products that they make. Let's look at the recent one, iPhone 7. Now, do you honestly believe that the steep price of the iPhone 7, which is about approximately $700, is that the cost that it took to create that product? The truth is, it isn't, because let's look at the process of creating this product. They had to buy resources, obviously. They had to buy raw material. They had to pay their labor. They had to pay for the shipping, the design. This is the direct cost of creating an iPhone. Now, obviously, this is never going to be equal to $700 per phone. It's going to be a lot cheaper than that. Let's say, for the sake of argument, all of these costs are equal to $400. Now you can see there's a difference here. There's a difference of $300 between the cost of its creation and the cost they're selling it at. Now, this 300 is actually the value that Apple has added. Now, how did they do this? How is value added to a product? Obviously, this value addition is the profit as well. And the way they add product to it is they have created a brand. How did they do that? They advertised it. They made it a lifestyle brand. They made it so that you need to have that phone. This whole design and aesthetic element of it is what makes Apple the company that it is. What gives it the ability to charge you so much. Because obviously, the same number of features in a phone, you can get that exactly for $400 in a Chinese phone, obviously. I won't say the same number because I'll be offending a couple of Apple fans in this video. But the truth is, they have this huge margin, and that is in the mind of the consumer. And they have created this value through advertising. They have created this value by dressing their product up. And that is how a company creates value. Now, let's have a small exercise here. Let's say you have a company that makes this whiteboard, all right? The company's name is Whiteboard Incorporated. Now, you have this product. You get this product from China. That's what pretty much every business does nowadays. And it costs you $5. Now, you want to sell this for a higher price. Now, take a minute and write down on your notebook how you're going to make this $5 into $10. What are you going to do that will convince your customer to buy this for $10 instead of $5? Alright, so there are a couple of things you can do, obviously. You can make the packaging more appealing. You can make it really nice and really high-end packaging with a golden wrapper or something. This is simple stuff, obviously. It sounds simple enough, but this is exactly what every company is doing. You can have a very nice ad with maybe Shah Rukh Khan in it using this whiteboard, and you can say, oh, this is the whiteboard that all the Bollywood stars are using, all the Hollywood stars are using, and that's how you can make people believe that this product is worth more than it actually is. This is the cost, and this is the selling price. So this is how companies actually create value. You can think of as many examples as you want. We can do a billion examples right now, how restaurants do it, how manufacturers do it, how people giving services do it. But this element of creating value is the backbone of any business, that you need to be able to sell at a higher price than you create. Now, moving on. Now, we've understood that there is obviously a need for business activity in the world, and that people will always need products, people will always need services, and there will be organizations to fulfill that service. Now, let's look at another concept here. In business terms, we call it scarcity. Now, it might be the word itself is exactly what it is. Scarcity means the absence of something, when you don't have something. In business terms, the way we see it is with, and we'll do this with an activity basically. So let's say all of you come to a party that I'm throwing, all right? And on the table in front of you, there's a bowl of popcorn. Now, I've popped about 1,000 rupees worth of popcorn here. And let's say there are 50 of you. And you're all standing in a line to get the popcorn. Now, the first person comes up and he takes a lot of popcorn with him and he leaves. Then the second, then the third, then the fourth. And by the time the sixth person gets to the popcorn bowl, he realizes that all the popcorn's gone. Now, obviously, what's the problem there? There was a lot of popcorn, and it's still not enough to feed every last person at that party. So I'm sorry to any one of you who didn't get the popcorn, but this is what the world actually is. You can have as much products and as many services as you need, and by the end, it's not going to be enough. Now, the second step here is now that the sixth person has gone and he has no popcorn, and he's pretty sad about it. Now, what are the options for him? What can he do to be able to get popcorn? Obviously, the first 5 people could share their popcorn with the sixth. And obviously, that will make him happy. But most in the real world, that's not exactly how it works. Yes, there are a lot of people who share wealth, who share their resources with everyone, but that doesn't really work practically. The second option is for me to make more popcorn. I can fill this bowl up again so that the sixth person can come up and he can get his popcorn as well. And that's the second option we have. Now, let's look at other problems that the world faces today. How many of you can think of situations where there have been scarcity, where people have not been able to get the right resources, and what are the options for them? Take a second to think about it. Also, now when there is scarcity, the next question that we need to ask is, all right, we've got a couple of options, and we've got the problem first and foremost, that we've got a sad person without popcorn. That's number one. Number two is we have certain options. 1, 2, 3. We can make more popcorn. We can share more popcorn. We can import more popcorn if you want. Now, the third thing is, who makes this decision? Let's look at a situation in your home or in your school, let's say. Now, in your school, you might have a computer lab and it has a certain number of computers. If your school has 500 students and there are 10 computers in the computer lab, how are they going to work with that situation? And who's going to make the decision to make it better? The principal would, obviously. He can have more computers He can allocate time for people to use computers. The reason why I'm using the computer analogy here is because, you see, students and teachers will always want and always need to work on computers. And until the principal actually puts out 500 computers in the lab, there will always be a need to do more. And that is what we're talking about here. There will always be a need to have more businesses. There will always be a need to have more services in our environment, until every person on the planet has their own personal business, has their own personal service, which is not possible. So, and also, scarcity is not something that only occurs in poor countries. I'm sure that the options you've put up, you might have that people don't have enough food and people don't have enough water or homes to live in. Scarcity can occur everywhere. The popcorn example that I gave, it's just a party, and it can happen at anywhere. It can happen in the first world country or in a third world country. So the need for products and services is worldwide, it's global, and obviously there's more in some places than the other for a certain type of product or a certain type of service, but the need is always there. Moving on to the next point. As I mentioned in the previous video as well, and I'm going to talk about this again, the next thing we're going to talk about is change. Now, ironically, in a business environment, in any business organization, there are no constants. Obviously, nothing can remain the same forever. But basically, the only constant, the only thing we can depend on in a business is that it will change. That there will be changes from the environment, there will be changes from the customers, there will be changes in your product and the products of your competitors. So change is the only constant, not only in business but in the world today. Now let's talk about our lives here in Pakistan. Now let's think about a product that we used immensely 10 years ago that we don't use anymore. And what could it be? Think about it for a second and come up with an example of a product that we used a lot 10 years ago but we don't use anymore. The first thing that comes to my mind is a TV antenna. Now, we all remember the times we'd be standing on the roof shouting at our sibling and saying, is it tuned yet? Is it tuned yet? But because we were setting the antenna and the TV was downstairs. We don't have that anymore because obviously, why don't we have the TV antenna anymore? Because of technological change. Technological change made the TV antenna obsolete. Now we don't need a TV antenna. We've got the internet, we've got Wi-Fi, we've got DVDs, we've got everything so that we don't have to go on the roof and shout anymore. Now, see, that's just one example of change. You can think of, now that we've looked back in the past, let's look at the future. Which products do you think we won't need in the next 10 years? Think of that for a second. Now, obviously, most of what the stuff that you might be coming up with would be a fantasy that you wouldn't want to use these products anymore. The first thing that I could think about is cars that are powered by petrol or any kind of natural fuel. So yeah, fuel. Let's look at fuel. 10 years down the road, we've already seen the hybrid and we've already seen the eco-friendly car revolution, and people are coming up with electronic cars and everything. So fuel is slowly going obsolete. 10 years now, from now, we're all going to have cars that don't use fuel, that use water or sunlight or something. And that's a good fantasy to live in, obviously, but that's how technology is growing, and that's how demand is going to change. Now that we've seen that demand can change over time, depending on the things that people like, depending on the things that people want. Also, let's have another example of something that went out of style or something that people just stopped using anymore. The first thing that comes to my mind is MySpace or Orkut. Any of these two social websites. Now, there was a time when Orkut was all the hype. Everyone had an Orkut account. It was considered cool to have an Orkut account. You could talk to your friends and everything. But then, over time, the trend just faded away and it was replaced by something called Facebook. So, trends can change. Technology can change. People's moods can change. So now you can have an idea of the kind of complexities that run in the minds of a business manager. How are you actually able to manage all this? People can change their mind at any time. People are buying iPhones today. Tomorrow they might move to the new Google device that's coming out. So change is always there, and as a manager, you need to accept that. As a manager, you need to be prepared to face change, and you need to be able to anticipate the change that's coming up, and you need to be able to make changes within your organization to actually cater to that change. And on that point, we will come to the element of creating value. Now, had MySpace or Orkut stayed up to the competition, had they created more value in their businesses, they might not have died out. Had they made it more easier to use as Facebook is, had they integrated Orkut with a couple of other websites like Facebook does, had they made it more exclusive, had they given it more features, had they created more value into their product, they might not have gone out of business. And that is the element of change. We are going to be discussing this throughout this program because change is ever present and we cannot fight it. Alright, so now that we've talked about the things that can go wrong for a business, let's talk about the things that a business needs to actually operate. What does a business need? Now, we've discussed this in the previous points as well, but let's actually make a proper list of it and see the things that a business requires to run. So here it is, the list. The first thing a business might need, obviously, is capital. Now, capital means their finance. A business needs money. You cannot run a business without having any kind of finance. Obviously, you need a certain level of money to pay your employees. You need money to pay your overheads. You need money to create your product or service. So capital is the first thing a business might need. You need to write this stuff down because it's important and they ask questions about this stuff. The second thing a business might need is land. Obviously, premises is very important. It's a huge asset when it comes to a business, and you need to be able to have a certain premises where you create your product, where you store your product and everything. That's pretty important. The next thing obviously is, believe it or not, a business needs government intervention. A business needs to have a set rules or standards that they need to follow because they need law and order, obviously. Imagine a business trying to operate in a country where there's nothing to live for and people are dying and people are don't have the resources and the people are unable to buy their product because of a hazardous living situation or economic situation. So a company needs the government to create an environment where they could operate. They need law and order. They need infrastructure. Now, how could you... Now, see, let's take another example here. The government thing. The biggest example of this is China. China has created an amazing environment for businesses. China has created an amazing environment for businesses and producers to come to their country and use their land and use their infrastructure because they've set their rates to an amazing level. They've got the raw materials, they got everything. So now, with this example, you can see how important government is for a business. Obviously, the next thing a business needs is enterprise, the thing we're studying right now. Enterprise is management. Enterprise is the people that make up a company. Enterprise is the risk takers, the decision makers, the people who are going to run the organization, the people who decide what to sell, what not to sell, what cost to sell it at and everything. So a company needs enterprise. The next thing a company needs is labor. Now, the difference between enterprise and labor is that this was decision makers and high-end management. This is unskilled or temporary or permanent or skilled labor that actually create the product. For example, Steve Jobs was the enterprise. Some worker in China is the labor for Apple. And a company definitely needs that. Another thing a company needs is suppliers. Obviously, when you create something, let's take this pen for a second. This pen is made up of plastic. It's made up of ink. And it's got this thing in the middle that actually enables you to write. So this company might have acquired plastic from someone. They might have gone out and said, I want to buy ink for my pens. So that's where you get suppliers. You pay them and they give you a product or a service that you actually mold and add value to so that you can sell it for higher. And obviously when it comes to selling, a company definitely needs its customers because that is how they are going to make money off their products. So there you have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are 7 things that a company definitely needs when it comes to operating or selling their product or services. Now, you can take a second here and think of any company that comes into your mind, and you can add these 7 things to them and see what they have and what they need. Let's go for Toyota this time. Now, Toyota obviously needs capital. They need to have the money required to buy their raw materials from their suppliers. They need to have the money to pay their labor. They need to have money to buy premises. So money is obviously related to all of these. And they've got their premises where they create their cars. They've got their laborers who assemble the cars and set up the raw materials. They've got suppliers who give them metal and the tires and everything that they need to make the car. They've got their managers who decide on what to name the car, what to sell it at, what the price of it is, what the distribution is. The main big decisions that need to be made will be made by the enterprise. And obviously, then there's us, you and me, who buy Toyota cars and in our everyday lives. So you can take any example that comes to your mind and do exactly what I did. As we've seen that there are many things that a business needs to operate successfully, and there are many problems that can occur while a business is operating. So the next question that obviously we need to ask ourselves is, why do businesses fail? We've seen throughout time that there have been amazing companies that have come out with outstanding products, but they just end up disappearing over time and their products die out. And there are many reasons why a company might fail. The first reason that a company might fail is a lack of record keeping. Now, as you might have understood by now, running a business is it requires a lot of meticulous calculations, and it requires a lot of attention to detail. Now, if a company does not maintain their records, if a company does not know where they have to deliver, when they have to deliver, and all the stuff everything in between, they might not be able to survive for long. Now, let's talk about a restaurant in this example. A restaurant that serves burgers. Now, I run a restaurant and I say, all right, I'm going to buy 5 kgs of chicken. I'm going to buy 25 loaves of bread. I'm going to buy a lot of vegetables and everything. And I put them right here and I'll ask my chef to make it. And then when a customer comes in, I'll just wrap it up and send him home on his way. And if a delivery comes in, I say, all right, that's the address. I'm going to take this burger and go over to that address myself, and I'm going to deliver it. But halfway there, I realize I didn't write it down. And then at night when I'm closing up, I realized that I didn't write down how many burgers I sold that day, or what kind of revenue I made, or how many buns I have left, or what the cost of my chicken was and what I need to sell it at. Maybe I'm selling at a lower price. Maybe the cost of creation was 500 rupees and I'm selling it for 300. So do you realize how important it is to write things down, to keep records in a business? And this is, you'd be surprised how many big organizations fail because of this. Because obviously as the size of business increases, you need more. It gets really complex and really complicated, so that they need huge systems and softwares to store all of their data. Now, that's an important part of any business, where you need to know at any point what's going on. You need to have complete records of every transaction that you do, everything that you hope to do in the future as well. Now, another reason why companies fail is lack of capital. Capital is needed for the day-to-day running of an organization. Let's take a construction firm in this example. For the sake of argument, let's say I have a construction firm and I'm creating this beautiful tower in the middle of suburban Lahore, and I'm going to sell it at a very high price. And I say, all right, I've got the money. I'm just going to start creating this. Now, we worked floor by floor, and when I get to the 3rd floor, I realized, oh, I'm out of money. I don't have any more capital left. And now I've got all the suppliers that gave me cement and bricks and everything, and I can't pay them. And I've got my customers waiting for my product, and I can't deliver the product. That is why companies fail. You need to understand that capital needs to be perfectly managed. So now the question is, how do you perfectly manage your capital? And there are certain steps that you can take as a business. You can construct cash flows so that you know where your money is going, how much money you have left, and when to inject more capital into the organization. You can, and that is the next point, you can inject more capital, but obviously you will need to know when you're running out, so that you have a kind of system that now that I have this amount of money left, I need to inject more into the company. And for companies that take loans from their banks, they need to have good relationships with their banks and their suppliers so that they can have a credit period of banks and suppliers. So that you can have a credit period that you don't have to pay right away, or your bank can loan you out whenever you need money. So this is how you maintain your capital and avoid your company going under. And obviously, when we talk about the resources that you have to manage, the records that you have to keep, you have to talk about management. Poor management always leads to a company going under. Now, we've talked about how if as a manager you don't know how much money you have left, or how much money you need, or if you're not record keeping properly, or if you're not making the right decisions at the right time, your company can go down. And for that, you need experienced, skilled managers who know the variables, who know that there can be change, who know that they need innovation, who know that their management style needs to be perfect on spot so that they know whatever is going on within the environment and inside the business. Now, talking about the environment, that is, as we've discussed before, another major reason why companies die out. And as a manager, as an owner of an organization, you need to know the changes that are happening in the environment. I talked about this in the introductory video as well, and that can be linked here. For the A-level exam specifically, you can never be too prepared because there are just so many things that you can learn. There are so many resources out there that you never know what you need and how much you need. And that is exactly what happens in a business, because the environment is so dynamic, it's so ever-changing. Your competitors can bring a new product. The technology that you're using might go obsolete. The government might introduce a new law or that adds more taxes to your product. And if you don't add that to the final cost of your product, you might end up losing money. So basically, a good manager needs to be aware of every change happening in the environment at any point in time. Now, obviously, once again, we can go back to creating value. How do you ensure that your business does not fail? You add value to it using efficient management. You efficiently manage your capital and give your product and service a value. Because if you end up failing your business, you're going to lose all the value that you have created. So a manager should always know how much value is being added to the company. You should always know the change, which we've also talked about within the organization. You need to be aware of everything that's happening at all times. Now, let's look at, there are certain types of businesses that operate. Obviously, so far, we've talked about businesses that are there to make a profit, that are there to sell their product for the highest price that they can, so that they can take home some money, obviously, and that's the nature of business activity. But there is another type of business, and we'll discuss it now. What are social enterprises? Now, let's look at a definition. A social enterprise is a business with mainly social objectives that reinvests most of its profit into benefiting society rather than maximizing returns to its owners. Let's write this down. It's slightly tricky to understand, but it's not exactly very difficult. A social enterprise is a business with mainly social objectives that reinvests most of its profits into benefiting society rather than maximizing return to owners. Now, let's break this definition down. So, the first thing we have is social objectives. Now, what are social objectives? They might be, they're basically to benefit society. So, any kind of NGO that promotes health, or that gives out products that are related to health, that give out food, that give out job opportunities to people. Any organization that helps people is an organization that has social objectives. Now, what is reinvests most of its profit? Now, obviously, when you talk about an NGO or when you talk about a social enterprise, these companies are not charities. So basically, they do need money, they do need capital, and they do need to sell a certain amount of product, or they need to acquire capital somehow, because obviously you need money to give any kind of product or service, you need money for all the 7 things that we talked about. You need money to acquire land. You need money to pay off your suppliers. You need money to pay off your managers. You need money to pay off your labor, the product that you're creating, the cost of that product. So basically what a social enterprise does is it does sell its product, or it acquires money, but instead of putting that money in the pockets of the owners, it reinvests within the organization to give more benefit to the people. Now let's take an example of a social enterprise that some of you might be aware of. If you don't, you need to go check them out on Facebook or their website. It's called SeedOut. Now what SeedOut does is, it is a crowdfunding organization. Crowdfunding means that it takes money not from a bank or as a loan. It takes money from people. Now let's say I would want to donate 1,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees or 100,000 rupees to SeedOut. What they're going to do, they are not going to use that money to maximize return to their owner. They're going to give that money out to people in need in the form of a loan. Now what they do is, let's say there's a farmer A, and he needs to buy a tractor for his farm, and that will enable him to maximize his crop production, that will enable him to have his own business. So what SeedOut will do, it will take money from me and it will give it in the form of a loan to a farmer, who can obviously pay it back whenever according to their plan, which you can check out on their website. So basically the money is involved, obviously. So when they get this money back, they might give it to, I don't know, an entertainer or someone. Let's say someone who is in the entertainment field and he needs a new camera, or someone who has a household business or a small industry where they create small products for people to actually get money. So that's what SeedOut does. They do have profits, but they re-inject it back into the business so that they can give it to more people, or their other sources are people who like to donate money. So the money is involved, but it does not mean that the company itself is keeping money in their own pockets. So that is what a social enterprise is. Now, a social enterprise gives many benefits to society, obviously. It gives economic benefits, obviously. So it gives economic benefit to the people working within the organization. For example, if it's an organization that creates jobs, or it obviously gives some money to its labor for creating the product. Let's say SeedOut obviously gave money to someone to create their website, so it does give economic benefits to society as well. There are obviously social benefits, that it provides jobs, it provides support for local people, it gives advantages to the community at a larger level, and obviously there are environmental benefits as well. Now you've got these NGOs who are working on eradicating or minimizing global warming, or our carbon footprint on the planet, and these organizations help the environment by putting out stuff like planting trees, or doing campaigns to people to reduce their carbon footprint. So these organizations obviously give a huge benefit to the economy. It gives benefits to society at a whole, and it gives benefits to the environment. Now, there is a concept here called the triple bottom line. Obviously, the 3 objectives of social enterprise, which are economic, social, and environmental. But you need to remember this term, triple bottom line. Whenever you hear this term now, you need to write this down as well. Whenever you hear this term, you're going to remember, oh, this is a social enterprise, and it gives economic, social, and environmental benefits to the people, the society at large. The last thing that we are going to talk about is the manager, the entrepreneur who actually runs the business. Throughout this entire video, we've talked about how you need effective management, how you need someone who knows what's going on at any point in time within the environment, within the organization. So the question we are going to ask ourselves now is, what is the role of an entrepreneur? Now, the first thing you need to know is who an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur is someone who takes the financial risks of starting and managing a new venture. So let's say if I go about and I start a restaurant, or if I go about and I start a manufacturing company or an industry, I am the entrepreneur because I took that risk. I took my money, or money that I got from somewhere, acquired as a loan or as an investment, and I allocate it, and then I run that business That makes me an entrepreneur. Now we're going to talk about the things that a good entrepreneur needs to do. The role of an entrepreneur obviously is very important. So that person needs to have a certain level of skill, and we're going to talk about the skills and characteristics of successful entrepreneurs. And obviously you can do this example at home. You can think about yourself and how you might have had a business idea and you would want to implement it. See, this is what this course, the Business Studies A-Levels course does. It puts you in the driver's seat, and you can actually use all of this information to start your own business. And you can use all of this information to work in an organization to make you a good manager, a good entrepreneur, so that you can effectively manage and face the challenges that an entrepreneur faces. Now, what are the characteristics of a good entrepreneur? The first is innovation. Now, we've talked about this in the key concepts as well. An entrepreneur does not necessarily have to be someone who invents something in the traditional sense, but they must be able to carve a new niche in the market that could attract customers in innovative ways and present their business as being different from others. So that's what you need in an organization. You need to have ideas. You need to have a product that's different. Why would customers come to you? That's the characteristic of an entrepreneur. You need to know how your product is different from your competitors. You need to know how you're going to make it better, how you're going to innovate your processes, your advertising, your product itself, so that people actually come for your product instead of going to a competitor's product. The second, obviously, is commitment and motivation. It is not at all easy to run an organization. Let me tell you that. There are a lot of sleepless nights involved. There are times when you don't know where the money is going to come from. You've created a product now, you've innovated and you've created a product that is excellent and you believe it's going to create a revolution in the market. But then there's this time period where you're always confused and you're afraid because you have overheads to pay. You've got bills to pay, you've got the people working for you, you have to pay them. And it's really demotivating when it comes to it because it's scary. And for an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, he needs to have a huge commitment and he needs to be very motivated, because that's how you actually face the challenges of the environment, the innovation, the competitors specifically as well, and the overheads, the bills and everything. You need a lot of commitment and motivation to be a successful entrepreneur. The third thing an entrepreneur needs to be is multi-skilled. Now, an entrepreneur will have to make the product, promote it, sell it, count the money, keep the books. Now, these different business tasks require a person who has many different qualities, such as being keen to learn technical skills and able to get along with people, handling money and everything. So basically, an entrepreneur needs to have a certain number of multi-skills, that he needs to have an understanding of technology, that he needs to have an understanding of the business, he needs to have an understanding of how to maintain money, he needs to have an understanding of how to talk to people and communicate to customers and suppliers. So a multi-skilled entrepreneur is a successful entrepreneur. The next thing we need, obviously, is confidence. Now, as I talked about in commitment and motivation, an entrepreneur needs a lot of confidence and the ability to bounce back from failure, because in business you always face failures. There are going to be days when you're not going to sell a single product, when you'll have, in my case, you'll have your electricity cut off of your office. That happens. That's really common. But you need to have the confidence to bounce back from these situations. You need to think about how to get yourself out of these situations, because these sleepless nights, they get to you, and you need to be confident enough and committed and motivated enough to bounce back from this. And obviously, an entrepreneur needs to be a risk taker. Sometimes the market moves in a way that you find yourself at a loss. Like if you've got a product and you realize that you're about to create a product, but you realize that there might not be a demand for it, but you've got this gut feeling that there might be. So this risk that you take, risk can be calculated, it can be a gut feeling, but for an entrepreneur, he would want to calculate it as much as he can. And but then again, at the end of the day, the decision to invest money means that there is the chance for you to lose money at the end of the day. So a good entrepreneur needs to be able to take risks when necessary and be able to take action in face of opposition, in face of problems, in face of a billion problems that can occur within a business. Now there you have it. This was our first lecture on enterprise, and we've covered all the subunits within it. In the video that you're watching right now, I'm going to attach some supplementary coursework, which is going to be a couple of questions from past papers. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is an AS level program, AS level unit, and which will appear in paper 1 and paper 2. So I'm going to attach a couple of questions within this video from paper 1, obviously, and paper 2. And what I would want, right after watching this video, this is kind of like a homework. You take a couple of hours and you try to solve these questions to the best of your ability. And if you face any problems, you can check out the description in the video right here, and you'll get all the solutions that you need, even to contact me at points in time, and we'll solve this out together. And as you can see, I've tried to make it as easy as possible, and to use as many examples that are in your life so that you can understand what's going on. And we've covered the first unit. There are going to be a couple of more subunits in unit 1, which we'll discuss in the next video. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped.